Let's take a couple of moments and we'll check out the dimmer settings on Pioneer's AVH-290BT. So from any of my sources, I'm going to touch the gears up here, and I want to scroll down, or I want to go to the toolbox, the wrench and the screwdriver here, then I want to scroll down there until I get to the dimmer settings, and we'll touch dimmer settings here. Now the dimmer settings can work three different ways, and that is the dimmer trigger that we see right here. The dimmer trigger can work auto, manual, or time. Auto means not automatically, but when the car's headlights are switched on, the dimmer can also switch on. Now there's a wire on the back of the head units, the orange wire with the white stripe. This has to be wired into your car properly so that when your car's headlights switch on, the dash lights dim and the head unit will also dim. It only works if it's wired into the car. The second setting that I can choose is the manual setting. The manual setting means that I'm going to go in and switch the dimmer on or off manually whenever I want to. So right now, when I have the manual setting chosen under the dimmer trigger, I have the day-night setting. I can choose the night setting, and you can see the head unit is dimming. And if I choose the day setting, you can see that it becomes brighter. Now, if I was going to use the manual setting, I would also put a star beside this so it goes into my favorites menu. Now you can see day-night is in my favorites menu, and I leave the menu here on the favorites. So now if I'm driving along and I decide I want to dim the radio, it's starting to get dark outside, I just hit the gears and my day-night setting is right there, and I can switch it to night and go back out to my normal AV system. When it's bright again in the morning, I can switch that back on using my favorites, and it's easy to use that way. So let's go back to the dimmer settings here. We want the toolbox and down to the dimmer settings. And my final setting here is the time. So we'll go back up, and you can see the dimmer duration is grayed out here. Can't get to it. We need to engage the parking brake. When I engage the parking brake, dimmer duration is available. And now this tells me that the dimmer will switch on at 6 p.m., 6 o'clock in the evening, and it will switch off at 6 a.m. or 6 o'clock in the morning. Now maybe you live in an area with daylight saving time, or you need to change this a little bit one way or another. So my switch on time, I'm going to make a little bit later. I'll make it 7:30 p.m. is when the dimmer switches on. My switch off time, maybe I'll make that a little bit earlier. I'll make it at 5:15 a.m. is when the dimmer switches off. So the dimmer is on in this blue area right here. And so you don't need to manually switch it if you don't want to. And it does not switch on or off based on your headlights. So if you use daytime running lamps or your headlights are on all the time, your dimmer does not need to be switched on all the time if you use the timer function. So once you've made your adjustments on the time function for the dimmer here, now let's look at the brightness of the dimmer. So I'm going to hit the X here, and we'll go back to the gears and the toolbox, and we'll come down to picture adjustment. Now under picture adjustment, you see our dimmer function right here. So right now the dimmer is at plus 48. That's as high as it will go. And if we want the dimmer function, we're going to switch the dimmer function on. I'm going to go back to my picture adjustment, and that you see that my dimmer is at plus 7. That is really low. Now the dimmer is on, and I want the radio to dim at night, but maybe that's a little bit too dim. So now I'm going to make it a little bit brighter. I'll say I'm going to make it 15 so it's a little bit easier for me to see at night. So now I'll hit the X, and we'll go back to that dimmer setting, switch it into daylight mode again. And then when we switch it back into nighttime mode, you can see it doesn't go all the way back down. It goes back to the setting that we chose. So when you're done making these adjustments, just hit the X to escape.